The dot on my sister's wall has ruined my life. I don't know how to start this off. I don't know how or where to even begin with this train wreck of a story. But I will try my best. You read the title and clicked after all. Please, don't leave. I don't think I'll make it out of here alive. And if I don't, I at least want someone to hear my story before I inevitably meet my end, so to speak. This is going to sound crazy, but that's what this is for, right? Crazy stories? This madness started all when I found something in my sister's room. A small, black dot on the wall near her bed. It was high up, almost reaching the ceiling. Now, mind you, she's about 5. There was no way for her to get up there, nor any way of her slinging anything up there. At the time, I demanded to know. I kept asking her and asking her every other day. She refused to tell. She only stared at me in response. It was mostly not weird at that point. 5-year-olds are weird, it's in their nature. They are small children without the mental capacity to explain or understand most things. But I still tried. I tried my hardest to get an answer. My mom began questioning it too at the time. She figured if my sister wouldn't answer her, perhaps she'd answer me. But no. At the time, even my sister, who trusted me dearly as her older sister, refused to open up to me about it. Over time, about the span of a few weeks or so, I noticed something rather peculiar. The dot seemed to have grown. It grew from the size of a dot that looked like if you tapped the wall with a pen, all the way to the size of my thumb fingerprint. I immediately questioned my sister, and again, no answer was to be had. So I went to my mother at the time, and my hypochondriac of a mother immediately assumed it was mold. Maybe some odd-looking mold that was growing and maybe hurting my sister somehow? We didn't know. I wish we moved. My eyes are so blurry from tears, it's hard for me to type this out right now. So please, bear with me on any spelling mistakes. Anyways, this odd dot on the wall continued to grow. I even think for a week, it went green if I remember correctly. The weirdest part one remember is that after, about a month after it appeared, my sister went mute. Not an exaggeration, I promise. She went entirely mute. Even grunting or groaning wasn't something she did anymore. My sister is, or well used to be, very expressive. Very loud, lots of hand gestures, lots of squealing and groaning. Soon she refused to speak. The dot went blue at this time if I recall correctly. She only nodded, shook her head, or wrote things down. Nothing more, nothing less. Her teachers were suspicious of my mother, and I to say the very least. It's not often an expressive and verbal child goes mute all of a sudden. The dot continued to grow. It turned blue and red and pink. At this point, my mother would come into my sister's room, hug her, and then book it out of her room. My mother didn't know what to do, before you blame my gracious and loving mom. We're dirt poor, scraping together money for food, and my mother works as hard as she can, and me being 16, also work in order to support ourselves after my father left. So it's not like we were able to move. We couldn't afford to get a professional on it. We tried to clean it off. It never worked, and afterwards me and my mom's hands would feel like they're on fire. They'd be completely normal looking, but they were highly sensitive. It hurt to even move my knuckles. We never tried that again. We learned our lesson. Things managed to get weirder after that. Soon my mom turned strange too. She constantly seemed scared. She'd whisper when she didn't think I was around. When she thought nobody was home, I'd hear her begging for silence. She got more aggressive. She steadily grew unstable. She never beat us. My mother just refused to make dinner. She'd get an odd look in her eyes when I brought up the dot and demand that I shut up. So I did. I never mentioned it again. This is the first time I'm even allowing myself to think of it without reprimanding myself for it. We've had the dot for a solid year now. It was huge. It covered my sister's wall and ceiling like a cancerous growth. It even began to affect me too. I'd think of it and my brain would hurt. I'd desperately think of trying to scrub it off, and it felt like something deep in my brain wouldn't allow me. I'd go to get a sponge and I'd somehow end up outside the front door before I snapped out of my trance. We ignored it. It was a part of our lives. It was family. A god even. My sister would pray to it every night, praying silently for an A on her tests. And she'd get it. She'd get A's and B's. She'd get everything she wanted. A week before the final event, the closing chapter, I caught myself leaving food at the dot, like an offering of sorts. I snapped out of it, and yet when I thought of taking the food back to the kitchen, I remember screaming of agony. It felt like a hot poker was jabbed into my temple. I had strange nightmares that week, just of me watching the dot grow and form and contract. It had changed colors, the seasons changed as I stood there. My body grew old and decayed whilst the dot grew before a hand reached out of it and towards me. And then I woke up, sweaty and screaming. And so here we are, at the official last page of my story. I commend you for sticking around this long. Thank you. And with this, I will continue. I'm sure you're still here out of morbid curiosity. I will give you what you want. The final page. I walked into my sister's room to kiss her goodnight. She wasn't in her bed. She was at the wall, the dot. She was on her knees, her hands on the wall as she leaned her head to the wall. I watched in horror as a hand reached out, patting her on the head as a deep voice spoke. It was almost heavenly. Good dear, thank you for tonight's offering. The hand slowly pulled my sister into the wall. She slid through it, and I ran to her, gripping her ankle. I tried so hard to pull her out, with all my might. She was my little sister. My responsibility. I loved her, and I wasn't going to lose her to what was once a literal dot on the wall. Growling had came at that action, and I let go, startled. I saw my sister's body fully recede into the wall as another hand popped out the wall. Then a torso, then a head, and then 2 legs. A fully formed humanoid, but it wasn't human. I knew this. It was colorful. It was pink. I blinked. It was blue then I blinked. It was green now. How dare you disturb my offering? It hissed this out, sounding reminiscent of a snake. I felt like I was in a trance before I spotted it coolly walking towards me. I backed up, horrified at the sight before me. It walked awkwardly, its legs seemed wrong somehow. Its legs would bend at awkward angles, as if its joints were askew and out of place. It reached its hand out, reaching for my forehead. I took another step back before I turned around and ran. I ran to my room and I slammed the door behind me, quickly propping a chair against the door. I heard it scream and scream profanities. It hurled obscenities at me that I didn't know existed, nor that any living being had the guts to speak. I've been locked in my room for a week now. I've drank all the leftover water bottles in my room. My stomach is tied in knots. The screaming and almost polite knocking comes in waves. I can hear footsteps pacing outside my door. The occasional plea to let it in. My brain hurts. I should allow it in, I know I should. But I want to get my tail out first. I need to warn people. Warn them of what? I'm not too sure, but of something. I had a sister. I don't know where my mother is. That dot turned out to be a monster and my life is completely upside down. I can't even leave my room. I have a pocket knife in my hand. I may kill myself, just while I have a moment of clarity. While I can trust my own mind. While I know that thing won't try and manipulate me into opening that damn door. I'm afraid this is goodbye. I think I may procrastinate my death. Maybe someone will come and save me? Nobody's paid the mortgage in months after all. Maybe somebody will come by, see this monstrosity, and call the cops? I doubt it, but I'm so hopeful. If nobody comes in 2 days, I'm dead. I'm holding out. If nobody comes in 2 days, I am dead and gone. In 2 days, don't come looking for me. I don't know what this thing is. I don't know what it does. All I know is that it's coming for me and it came for my family. Don't let it get to you as well. Please. Hear my story, and if you see a dot on the wall, fucking move out. I don't care if you have to become a hitman in order to move out. Do it. It's worth it, it's better than my fate. Learn from my mistakes.